Hello everyone, this is Ryan from Heavyocity, and I'm here to show you a demo that I made using our brand new product, NOVO Essentials. First off, for those of you who are not familiar with NOVO, back in 2017 we went out to the Warner Brothers scoring stage in LA and recorded a string orchestra there. And then we took all those samples and brought them back here to New York and sort of mangled and processed them to our liking. And we created NOVO, which is one half a fully functional, multi-sampled, playable string orchestra. And in the other half, you have the 3-channel designer presets, which are populated with effectual strings, samples, sound design, as well as rhythmic loops, all stuff that we made in-house here to create all kinds of hybrid textures and combine them together. For NOVO Essentials here, what we did is extract the core elements of NOVO basically into a sleeker and obviously more budget-friendly version of the library without sacrificing any of its quality. This instrument combines the violins, violas, cellos, and basses from NOVO into a single full ensemble preset. That still includes your close room and hall mics as well as the full mix channel, multi-sampled dynamic layering as well as round robins. I'll just play it real quick for you. Of course, you also have your dynamic control via the mod wheel. It also includes the string designer, where you can combine the organic samples with a collection of synthetic samples as well as the rhythmic loops. It also includes the loop designer, which you can use to combine up to 3 loops simultaneously on the designer page. And then of course you have the 3-channel options for processing, and you can do all kinds of crazy things here. You can also just play these loops as you like. That's NOVO Essentials in a nutshell. So without further ado, I'd like to show you the track I made using NOVO Essentials. I also got a little help from our old friends Aeon and DM307. This track is called Dawn to Dusk. And there it is. And for those curious about my setup here, I am using Digital Performer 9.5 as my DAW, and I am hosting Contact inside of Vienna Ensemble Pro, version 6. Let's take a look at some of the instruments I'm using here. It starts off with this airy, atmospheric pad called Phantom Breeze. It's one of the ambient snapshots in the String Designer. And basically, I'm just playing 2 notes here. And I basically took this right out of the box. I just added a low-pass filter to cut off some of the bulky mid and low frequency stuff in there, just to make room for other instruments. And then I added our Frozen Tail reverb, which is our biggest convolution reverb, and just to really space it out nice. So I've got this Phantom Breeze pad sort of holding down the fade in the intro, and then it kind of sustains through the entry of the piano and strings. This piano is from Aeon, and these strings are just a wet snapshot, which basically adds some convolution reverb on the master, pulls down the close mics, and brings up the hall mics a little bit. I'll just solo those strings for you real quick. As you can see, I'm using a lot of automation to drive the mod wheel up and down. I use a lot of that in any sort of pad scenario. Anytime you have lush strings that are just sitting, they really need to have some kind of movement. And this mod wheel makes it really easy to add that. And especially with this reverb, these are just super playable. Well, that's not the right key. There it is. And for the piano here, I'm just basically using the Aeon piano straight out of the box. I did a little bit of extra EQing to roll off the low end, and I added some verb from Altiverb to give it some space. And another thing I like to do with this piano and many other pianos is to bring down the velocity curve and reduce the velocity maximum in this case. And what that does is sort of bring your curve down and keep you out of the territory of some of the louder samples. For a light, airy composition like this, you really want to stick, personally, I like to stick to the lower velocities and keep things nice and light. And especially good for playing in that B section. See there, I played it too hard, so I would probably even bring down the curve a little more. Keep it nice and light. So once I've set the stage with the piano and strings, I start to add a little bit of movement. And it's sort of layered low. Low string staccatos. And as well as a pizzicato line that's kind of responding to the piano. And then I add some higher staccatos. And I also layer in some loops. And of course, I'm using automation to sort of build volume and also just intensity. So the dense sort of rhythmic activity you heard there is actually a combination of the staccato samples and a couple of loops. I'll just solo those for you. So it's this loop here. Combined with the staccatos going. with a little bit of delay, and together you get this nice chunky sort of rhythmic vibe. So the loop preset that's going on here is actually one that I built from scratch, and it's got a couple of interesting things going for it. One notable thing I'm doing is some interesting envelope here on channel 2. Basically, I've got the attack tempo synced to 2 bars, and then a very abrupt cutoff after that. So just on that channel 2, you're getting a swell, and then a release, but there's a long echoing delay as well. So that gives a lot of movement, even if you're just holding down notes. And then you can re-articulate on different loops there. Just to give it a sort of up and down kind of vibe. That's one feature I really like, is the tempo syncing of the envelope. It's especially handy in the loop designer here. And then also for this third channel, I am just doing some creative EQ to bring down the low end and sort of mix in this one loop. Really is the only one I'm using on that channel, just to help that to mix into the full mix a little bit better. And I'm sure, as you heard in this last sort of build-up section of the first half of the track, I've got a bass that comes in, which is mostly a stock preset here called Uber Waves. This thing just wants to be a bass. I mean, you know, the uppers sound pretty good too. And obviously you can use the macro control to kind of find the sweet spot where you want it exactly. These can also just be lush synth strings, but I'm using it mostly as a bass here because it's got that nice full bass sound. As this comes down, I sort of build it back up by riding the mod wheel all the way up on this Uber Waves, bring out some of that grit. And then, of course, the drums come in. Of course, the most prominent sound in this second half of the piece are the drums, which are courtesy of DM307. Basically, I just used a kit groove here and sequenced a pattern that I like. And then I basically bounce those out to audio, just because when I'm mixing drums, personally, I like to have audio. I like to do a lot of different things as far as cutting, splicing, nudging, you know, using automated sends to verbs and stuff like that. I'm just much more comfortable mixing drums that way. And of course, this is really easy to do with the trigger keys here. Here you can just trigger one bank at a time, let it run through. And so then you have all your stems bounced out into audio. I won't go too deep into what I'm doing here because this is not a DM307 demo. As you can see in here, I'm automating a dedicated send to a gated reverb on the snare. This is a great way to achieve variance in the snare sound, is to have different amounts of verb with different hits. You can kind of hear the timbre of the snare drum change a little as you pull down the send or push the send up. And obviously it hits the compressor differently that I'm using on the drum bus here. And then I just did some basic cut edits, reverses, some destructive processing on the hi-hat, and then I nudged the kick a little bit forward to give it that sort of pressing forward. And then of course I've got all the drums on one bus here. And as the track progresses, I'm opening up a low pass filter and also just riding the volume automation on that aux track there. This is by no means a masterpiece of drum composition and mixing. This is a quick and dirty, it sounds good enough for a demo of a different product kind of thing. And that's one of the things I love about DM307 is you can very, very quickly throw together a passable drum beat from very little in a very little amount of time. One other prominent instrument for this part of the track is that thumping bass that I nicknamed Thumper. This is a custom preset that I sort of threw together quickly. It loads up the String Machine synth samples on channel 1 and uses the cycle engine to trigger them at a 16th note pulse. And one other thing that's going on here is that the filter, when you turn up the envelope on the per channel filter, which is controlled by the attack, decay, and sustain here, that's actually being triggered with every step of the cycle page. So that's how you get that combination of snap and thump, is with that filter moving with every beat. So with every beat, you're getting a quick attack and a quick decay of that filter. And it just adds a nice movement to it. I'm also using the gate to duck the downbeats of every note to make room for the kick. Because the drum beat's going doom, doom, ksh, doom, ksh, doom, doom, ksh, doom, ksh. So with every kick, it ducks a little. And of course, in addition to that, there's a big EQ scoop that sort of moves with the macro controller. And then I'm using some saturation from the drive unit here. On channel 2 here, I have a dirty and distorted synth called Dreadnought. And this is another instance where I'm making use of the tempo synced attack. This time it's just 1 bar. So you can hear with every attack there's this kind of quick expansion of that growly sound, and then it drops off really quickly, which just sort of adds some interesting flavor. And I'm EQing out some of that top end, so it's really just this muffled kind of growl that comes and goes with every attack. And on the third channel, on the high end, you hear that sort of ticky sound. That is just a loop using the cycle engine. With a fast delay going on. So I'm using my synth strings to sort of develop this darker section, the uber waves and the thumper, as well as the drums, obviously. And then I bring in some organic strings, which is really just the sustains from the beginning. Same preset, actually. The Phantom Breeze comes back as well, in a sort of subtle capacity. Got some aggressive Hans Zimmer style staccatos going on here. And as the track starts to culminate, I start layering in some loops just to sort of build rhythmic intensity. One thing you might notice is I have two separate loop tracks here, one labeled half and one labeled double. So I'm running my session here at 164, even though the sort of beat is more of an 82 kind of quarter note. And that's just a byproduct of how I started composing the track. Neither here nor there, really. But what I'm doing to achieve the loop effects that I want is I'm messing with the sync here in Contact. So this preset here is running loops at the tempo of the session, 164. Which works in this case. However, in the other loops, if I turn on the external sync, well, that loop clearly was not meant to be played at this tempo. Some were and some weren't, and that's just the way it is. So for this loop, I wanted it to play I wanted it to play basically at half the speed of my session. So I just turn off that external sync, cut my tempo in half, and there it is at the tempo that I want. So I've got a couple loops going at halftime, a couple loops going at full time. Let me just play all of the loop material for you right now. So I'm using some of the Aeon material as well here to sort of sweeten this last section. Just some Rhythmic Synths. So these Aeon synths, and there's actually two of them. The first one is Horning Echoes, which has this. That one's pretty much straight out of the box with a few modifications, some distortion and reverb. And then the other rhythmic synth that you're hearing is actually from a menu where I just tightened up the envelope and I'm just playing the same sample over and over again with a quick release. At first I had the whole loop holding down the entire time. But as you can imagine, that was way too dense, so I just decided it was a good backbeat. And when it all comes together... And lastly, for anyone who's curious, my mastering chain is composed of the FabFilter Pro Q2 EQ. The Ozone Dynamics compressor and maximizer, basically compressor limiter combo. Also, it's just some additional leveling from the wonderful sounding, clear, beautiful PSP Xenon limiter. And that's about all I have time for today. If you want to hear more demos, see more tutorials, videos, all the information about the product, tech specs, and requirements for NOVO Essentials, you can go to heavyocity.com and visit the product page. All that is there for your perusal. Thank you for watching, and until next time, stay heavy.